this is a fashiony question, but I think this is one you want to handle. Slade Wabe, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing, said, what about longer kilts? It seems like he's seen kilts that come down to even like the mid-calf advertised on Facebook, and it seems like a trend that's starting up or a trend that's out there. What's our opinion on kilts that are longer than the knee, like long length kilts for men?
Back in 2004, we did a Madonna's reinvention tour. Came around and they contacted us, and we did 43 kilts for the reinvention tour for all the dancers and all the other stuff that was there. We got the first dozen, either 5 or 6 or a dozen, somewhere in there, finished. And then they called us up and said, wait, don't start yet. We want to make them longer. So they ended up making everyone's box pleated. And I remember at that point, I didn't know what box pleated meant. Because it's like literally like the first,
right out of the gate.
Not even like 8 months of the company kind of thing.
Wow. Okay.
We were just wet behind the ears. And Kelly was sitting in the room, and I was talking to the agent lady, and she was like, yeah, we want box pleated kilts, and we want them to be longer. And I was like, oh, box pleated kilts, yeah, it's not a problem. And Kelly's looking at me from across the room. No, it was like the slow motion, so like trying to bat out the phone thing. So yeah,
awesome.
They ended up being like a military box, which is like, deeper on one side than the other. And they were 28 to 32 inches long for each of the kilts.
Okay.
And they had to, we had to redo the first, 5 or whatever we made at that point. But it's been done. We went to the concert. It was cool to see them live in concert, spinning around, doing flips and, bow staffs and the whole nine. Bow staffs and the kilts.
As they say?
As they were.
Voguing.
It still looked odd. And that was, mid-calf-ish kind of length for a lot of the dancers. As you wear kilts more often, you will kind of develop an eye. When I first started wearing kilt, I probably wore it a little bit low. But as I developed an eye for it and an eye for tradition, so to speak, it looks right, right, finger quotes, at the middle of the knee for guys. When it's longer than the middle of the knee, if it covers the entire knee, if it meets the top of the kilt hose, it looks a little bit more matronly, a little bit more feminine. If it's too far above the knee, like, an inch or 2 inch or 3 inches above the knee, it starts to look a bit feminine, like mini skirt-ish. So for my personal tastes, middle of the knee to the top of the knee is about the acceptable range, again, finger quotes, where I would want a kilt to land. It as a fashion type thing, guys would, or companies would make them, or might make them a little longer for an androgynous kind of metrosexual weird, vibe of fashion, not heritage. So in that instance, you do you. It's not my tastes, and it looks a little bit more feminine, and it's not traditional.
But that's where we're getting into a difference between kilts as a
fashion garment versus
a universally popular fashion garment versus a heritage, national dress kind of a thing.
But at what point is it no longer, I won't say no longer a kilt, but does it morph into something other than a kilt? Like a kilted skirt is still a kilt, technically. It is a pleated garment, but it's not worn to the knee. It's worn longer than the knee. So at what point is it no longer really defined, or should be defined, as a kilt, so much as
good question,
a kilted skirt for men, or a kilted skirt for
mug,
anyone,
as they used to say. And like back in the 2000s, the whole male unbifurcated garment was a trendy thing to talk about because of utility kilts, I think, originally. But I think I've looked at the photos from the Madonna tour, and my initial reaction to those kilts you guys made is that they look more like sarongs or something than a traditional Scottish kilt. And so I think that's basically, if you're emulating men's unbifurcated fashions from other parts of the world, there's latitude for a long garment. Like if it's a lungi or a dhoti or a sarong. I've seen some pretty badass guys wearing sarongs, and you wouldn't want to mess with.
Yeah, doing a haka or whatever.
Yeah, but it's well, that's Maori. But anyway,
sorry.
But the tartan adds a whole nother dimension of weirdness to that. I don't think a tartan with the gridular, as we say, pattern, looks right once the garment is getting too long. If you look, most of the Southeast Asian stuff, men's garments like that, they're solids or they're prints. They're not
Floral
gridular
prints and stuff like that.
Yeah, they're not gritty like a tartan is. So I think aesthetically it looks weird. It's a fashion forward thing. If you do it, it's certainly not traditional. So
yeah.
Bottom line, it's not traditional. You gotta decide which way you're going with your look.
And they were asking specifically about companies who are marketing it on Facebook or wherever else online.
I think they're trying to find a niche.
I think they're trying to find a niche, and they're trying to push boundaries, push buttons, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a traditional thing, period. If they're marketing it as a traditional Scottish kilt, then that's bunk. They don't know what they're talking about, and they should be drug out in the street and shot. If it's just
a moderate opinion.
Mildly. But if it's just a, hey, look at our fashion kilt,
right, then
okay, fine, because they're not claiming it to be traditional. But once you cross that line being the lower knee, it's tough to go back. I don't know.
Yeah, Scottish kilts have been about the length that we talk about at the knee for 300 years at least. So it is definitely, that is the traditional length, and for a number of practical reasons, as well as just that's the look that seemed the most manly and the most aesthetic for that time period.
The only thing that goes outside of that is if it was shorter, and that was more so it didn't, cut in the back of the knees if you're walking in wet grass.
Closer to the knee than closer to your hip,
Yes, exactly. I mean, the range we're talking about in where it falls on your body is at the highest an inch above the knee to middle of the knee. Americans, in their 30s, 40s, who grow up with jams and long shorts may want to say bottom of the knee, and I'll begrudgingly allow it in my mind, but no lower than the bottom of the knee. You need separation between the bottom of the kilt and the top of the kilt hose. You want to see a little bit of knee. You want to see the top of your calf.
Yeah.
The top of your leg.
Yeah, and those longer garments I alluded to, they're all lighter fabrics.
Yeah.
They're like cottons and silks. So the weight of the wool thing is not a factor. All right, we're shaggy dogging here like crazy, but
as we do.
It's either fashion or tradition. Sometimes they intersect, sometimes they don't.
So knock it off.
But don't wear a knockoff.
Indeed.
Yeah.